Hello, this is Sarah Barash. Welcome back to my channel. So I want to do another video about critical race theory, but this video is going to be specifically about anti-critical race theory legislation. So now, I've been meaning to do a video about this for a while. I've spoken about it at length on social media, especially on Twitter, and I have honestly been grappling with, the constitutionality, with the efficacy of anti-critical race theory legislation. And so I've honestly been grappling with this, and now I feel like I have a very cemented, strong position in favor of good anti-critical race theory legislation. Now, I just did a video, so if you want to go back and to the video that I just did, the one before this one, where I talk about the definitions of critical race theory, woke intersectional feminism, intersectionality, and cultural relativism. So I just did a video about that, and actually that video is getting rave reviews, and I'm super happy. And I also want to say right from the get-go, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm getting more and more subscribers. I still have a ways to go. I'm at about 426 subscribers right now, and I need to get to 1,000 subscribers to monetize my YouTube channel, and I would love to be able to do that. So please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It would mean the world to me. Thank you so much. So I just did the video with the definitions of critical race theory. Now, how I define it is that it's an ideology that asserts that a person who is deemed to be a member of an oppressed subsocial group has a higher moral and or legal and or epistemic status than someone who is considered to be a member of an oppressor subsocial group, of the larger social group. So that is how I define it. And so the problem with this, there's just a very obvious problem with this, which is that if that's the definition of critical race theory, then the problem with this is that the government cannot send or fund the message that one group of citizens is disfavored based upon race or religion, for that matter, and that will become pertinent in just a moment. But so that's the problem. And so there's been tremendous debate, of course, tremendous debate about whether or not we need to have anti-critical race theory legislation. And most of the legislation is specifically addressing critical race theory being taught in public schools to children, in the classroom to children at the elementary level, at the middle school level, at the junior high level, at the high school level. So most of this legislation is specifically addressing that, okay? And obviously Christopher Rufo and also James Lindsay have been very strong proponents, very strong advocates for anti-critical race theory legislation. All right, and so relatively recently, there was a New York Times piece that was written by my advisor at Yale, Jason Stanley, and David A. French, and also, oh, now I'm forgetting, I know the one other person, there were four, and the one other person was, I believe he pronounces his name Kameli, and he's considered to be amongst I believe he's part of the We the Fifth podcast, and he's considered to be amongst the anti-woke, anti-cancel culture set. So, and then of course my advisor Jason Stanley at Yale is considered to be, a leading social justice warrior. And then David A. French, I think, kind of a centrist, I think is his shtick. But he's gone pretty woke as of late and has come down on the side of critical race theory. So, and his argument is very flawed. His argument in favor of critical race theory is very flawed. And he wrote a piece recently, I can't remember the publication. Was it the National Review? Anyway, I'm going to address his very flawed argument. But so in this New York Times piece, and I'm forgetting the fourth author, forgive me. So anyway, these persons came down, they're against anti-critical race theory legislation because they think that this is violative of the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, because these are speech codes. So first and foremost, what I want to make perfectly clear, and this is something I try so hard to get across to people, please understand that the government does not have free speech. Like, if there's one thing I can get across to people in the context of anti-critical race theory legislation, please understand me when I say the government does not have free speech, okay? And an agent of the government speaking and acting under color of law does not have free speech. They are constrained. The government is constrained by the U.S., severely constrained by the U.S. Constitution. Please understand that the government cannot, just like the government cannot send or fund the message that one group of citizens is disfavored by religion, the government also cannot send or fund the message that one group of citizens is disfavored by race. Okay? That cannot happen. That's why the government does not have free speech. Okay? A public school teacher teaching elementary school kids, middle school kids, junior high kids, high school kids in a public school classroom does not have free speech. That public school teacher cannot send or fund the message that one group of citizens is disfavored by race. And this is the message of critical race theory. That is the message of critical race theory. Okay? So I just want to make that very clear, because I do acknowledge that two things I want to say that I acknowledge. I do acknowledge, one, that a lot of the existing bills, or bills that have actually been passed into law at the state level, banning the teaching of critical race theory in public schools. A lot of these bills and the laws are not great. They aren't. They are not great. They're not great. They're not good either. And I acknowledge that. I absolutely acknowledge that. And I apologize to Christopher Rufo and James Lindsay. I love both of them, and I support having good anti-critical race theory legislation, and I support Christopher Rufo and his efforts, and I support James Lindsay and his efforts, and I think they're both wonderful and fabulous. But I do think that a lot of the existing bills and laws are not good. They go too far. They're too broad. They are vague. And so what these bills need to say is that basically just exactly what I said. The government, they need to be brought in line with the Constitution. The government cannot send or fund the message that one group of citizens is disfavored by race. That's what these bills need to say. And so the bills are not great as they exist right now, most of them. I think I saw one that actually was pretty decent, that I think it was the Free Black Thought Twitter profile that that did a long thread on one anti-critical race theory bill that actually was pretty good. Maybe had just a couple little details that were a little off, but it was actually pretty good. And I can't remember which state's bill it was. But the other thing I want to say is that I also acknowledge that once you get to the university level, even at a public university, it does get a little bit trickier. And even at a private university, that receives federal funding, they also have to be in line and abide by, the U.S. Constitution. And this is usually, specified stipulated in the regulations that govern the dissemination of whatever federal funding, because as most people are well aware at this point, private universities in the United States get tons and tons of federal funding. But things do get a little bit trickier at the university level, even at a public university, regarding what is being taught in a classroom. Things are more clear-cut on the side of the unconstitutionality of critical race theory when we're talking about trainings, specifically for public employees. But in terms of what's being taught in the classroom, once you get to the university level, things do get a little bit trickier, because then you do, need to be concerned with academic freedom of the professors teaching in their classrooms, even at a public university. Now, something that I've always said, and that I said from the beginning, and I still believe is 100% the case, is that I feel like we do already know how to deal with the teaching of critical race theory in the classroom, even at the university level, in a public or private university. We know how to deal with this. And I feel like we also know how to write good anti-critical race theory legislation. We know how to do this. And what I have said from the beginning is that we need to use Establishment Clause jurisprudence as our guide, okay? We already have had this argument. We already have had this debate. We still have it, but we need to look to Supreme Court jurisprudence on the Establishment Clause to guide the writing of anti-critical race theory legislation and the teaching of critical race theory in classrooms, even at the university level in public and private universities. So basically, we teach religious texts, right? We teach religious texts even at the, I don't know about elementary school level, but I'm going to say middle school level, junior high level, definitely at the high school level. And why is this okay? Well, it's okay as long as you're teaching it as literature, as part of history, as part of cultural studies. It's important for people to know, like, I think it's Richard Dawkins or Christopher Hitchens, or probably both of them, and others have made the point that if you're going to study English literature, you need to read the King James Bible. You need to study the King James Bible. So to understand history, you should be studying religious texts. Of course you should. And it's really important in terms of cultural studies, for people to have, a sort of working knowledge of all the major religions of the world. Like, this is not a problem. We know this. We teach religious texts in public schools without proselytizing. And so we should be able to teach about critical race theory without indoctrination. This is why we should use Establishment Clause jurisprudence as our guide. And I think that I do sort of feel to some extent that we're making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be, to some extent, because in terms of what's being taught in the classroom, because we've already had this debate, we know what to do. If we can teach religious texts without proselytizing in the classroom, we can teach about critical race theory without indoctrination in the classroom. So something else, another point I wanted to talk about, and this is something that David French very explicitly and specifically addressed in his standalone piece, and it was also something that was addressed in the New York Times piece that was written by David French, Camelli, my advisor, Jason Stanley, and forgive me, I'm forgetting the fourth author. I'll look it up. But of the New York Times piece that was critical of anti-critical race theory legislation. So here's something that people keep saying that's an error. They keep saying, we don't need anti-critical race theory legislation because if people are actually being discriminated against on the basis of race, we have the Federal Civil Rights Act. So, and students in particular can appeal to the Office for Civil Rights if they feel that their federal civil rights have been violated. And so that sounds great in theory, but I want to make something perfectly clear. And this is a big part of the reason why I have now come down in favor of good anti-critical race theory legislation. And the reason why is because the Federal Civil Rights Act no longer protects white people in any meaningful sense, and it's just going to get worse. It's just going to get worse under the Biden administration, especially with Kristen Clark as the head of civil rights at the Office for Civil Rights in the Justice Department. So I am prime example number one that the Federal Civil Rights Act no longer protects white people in any meaningful sense. I literally begged the Office for Civil Rights to open an investigation at Yale. I was absolutely discriminated against, not only on the basis of my race, but definitely on the basis of my race by Yale University during the Living or Not Being While Black hate crime hoax at Yale. I was denied my due process rights. I was denied equal protection of the law. I was absolutely discriminated against on the basis of my race. I begged the Office for Civil Rights to open an investigation based on these egregious violations of my federal civil rights by Yale University, and they just refused. I appealed and I appealed and I appealed, and they just absolutely refused. So that's another very big point that I wanted to make. And then that's basically what I wanted to say. Yeah, and then just one other thing I wanted to say is that just please, everyone understand that Jeffrey A. Sachs, a philosophy professor, I can't remember the name of the university he's at, I think it's Arcadia. Anyway, please stop listening to anything he says about critical race theory, about, woke intersectional feminism, about anything, and about me. He is a lying bigot and a fraud, He doesn't understand the first thing about the First Amendment or the relationship between the First Amendment and the Federal Civil Rights Act. He's basically just talking out of his ass. And I abhor him, of course, because of what he did to me during the witch hunt at Yale that almost got me killed. But he has just been talking complete nonsense about anti-critical race theory legislation, about cancel culture, about, just about woke intersectional feminism, about everything. He's an idiot, basically. So just please, no one pay any attention to anything he has to say ever again. So I'm going to do one more video. So I think I covered pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about in terms of anti-critical race theory legislation. I don't want this video to get too much longer, so I'm going to do another video where I'm going to talk specifically about the relationship between the First Amendment, the Free Association Clause, Establishment Clause, Free Exercise Clause, Free Speech Clause, and the relationship between the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and the Federal Civil Rights Act, because I find that people are just really, really confused about this as well. So, so that's what I have to say. So I do support good anti-critical race theory legislation. I do think that the existing bills and laws leave something or a lot to be desired, but I have come down on the side that we do in fact need good anti-critical race theory legislation. All right, I will have all of my fundraising links below, and I love you all so much. Take care. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.